you can show and that there are other roses and that. What I really like to do today is talk to you about show roses. I want to start with a question is, do you show roses? I'm not going to ask for a stage of hands because I am going to contend that all of you show roses. That no matter if you're growing roses, you're showing roses. You cut them, do you take them to a rose show, or maybe many of you do, but others you just cut them and you bring them in the house. Or you put them on the dining room table, or you take them to a friend or a loved one, and you're showing them roses. Or you have people come to your garden, and you're showing them roses. And what are they coming to see? The roses that you're showing them. And so, going from that, from showing them and just cutting them and putting them in your house, or having people come to your garden to a rose show, is simply another way to show roses. But I would be surprised if there's anybody here who doesn't show roses. We show roses. This is from our garden. And you will observe from that, that's just a picture of a small portion of the garden, the number of floribundas. And what do you see when you see that garden? You see flowers. And I'm going to tell you right up front that the reason that I grow roses is because I like the blooms. Now, I get some laughter at that, and yet nowadays we have so many are telling us that the way you select roses is because they have good foliage, or because they have some other quality that has nothing to do with the blooms. Well, I like roses with good foliage because they enhance the blooms, but I grow roses for blooms. And when you show roses, to my mind, a show rose is a rose that blooms. And the more that it blooms, I'm probably better known as one who grows and shows hybrid teas or miniatures or mini-floras. But if you looked at the garden inventory that we have, the classification of roses that we have the most of are floribundas. We have over 100 floribundas. Why? Because they bloom. And because with blooms, we can show roses. Now, if you want to take roses to a rose show, I think I skipped a slide. No, I didn't. What happened to my other slide? Well, we'll just go with this too. Go to to show wedding roses anyway, if you want to go to a rose show, then the question is, what type of roses should you grow? You want to grow roses that obviously have blooms. And the slide I was looking for actually has a Texas expression on it. Maybe having come to Texas, I don't know what the slide happened to it, but the slide is an expression I came across a number of years ago, which says something to the effect that you can put your boots in the oven, but that don't make them biscuits. I use that phrase because I say we could put a rose on the show table, but that doesn't make it a show rose. And so to show winning roses, you have to grow show roses. So if you wanted to grow winning roses and actually take them to a rose show, I did a study a number of years ago, and I came up with this statistic. On average, the top 10 roses in each rose show category account for 52.6% of the winners. So if you really wanted to show roses and be successful at it, it's not that you have to grow hundreds of different varieties. There are certain varieties that do well, and they do well in a rose show. And you go in the rose show in there, and you're going to come across, if you've been to rose shows, certain varieties that show over and over because they have the quality that we expect, our judges expect of a show rose. If you want to get blooms, and here I know I'm preaching to the choir down in the South Central District, but often I have to explain this in the Pacific Southwest District. If you want blooms, you need bushes, and if you want large bushes, you need to put them on a rootstock that they're going to grow. And in California, where we grow them on Fortuniana. I'm looking over and Donna's smiling because if you read my book, you'll see in the discussion of Fortuniana where I had, as she described, poo-pooed Fortunianas before I got into Fortuniana and I moved to Arizona. She was the one who brought Fortuniana roses into Arizona. And having seen them grow them and grown them there, I have become. Here is Arizona. This is me. You'll observe that I'm wearing a Cleveland Indians baseball hat, which is my standard garden attire, and so I'm very thrilled this year that the Indians have made it to the World Series. What's interesting about this, on this picture ran in the American Rose magazine when I was given the Hedrick Award for exhibiting. And they wrote an article on me and ran this picture. And about a month later, I actually got a letter from the president of the Cleveland Indians.
Oh my God.
Which is very cool. It's basically, they had moved their spring training to Arizona, and he was thrilled to find out that there's some nut in Arizona who grows roses that wears Cleveland Indians baseball hats. I have that letter framed, I might add. Where do you find out what those roses are that do well in rose shows? Well, you go to my website, roseshow.com, which I've maintained since 2001. And all the show results in the country come to me, and they have for the last 25 years. And for the last 15 years, all those results are posted on a regular basis at roseshow.com. So if you want to see what wins, you can go there and then take a look at what's winning in your area, what wins in Houston or in Louisiana or wherever you're from. And I can tell you that that's a very important point, because what wins in some areas does not do well in others. Roses do perform differently in different parts of the country. The American Rose Society has Rose Exhibitors Forum, which is one of the quarterly publications, which is in the members only section of the website, which I am the editor of and have been for many years. I also maintain a Facebook site at Rose Exhibitors Forum, and each year we publish and put out a booklet called Horizon Roses. Many here are participants in Horizon Roses. This is 33 years it's been going on, where I obtain reviews of newest roses, roses that have been introduced in the last 5 years, written in the words of the reporter as an exhibitor to discuss their exhibition potential and how they're working in the garden. We typically have between 80 and 90 top exhibitors throughout the country give information. You can get information on that at roseshow.com. It's available on amazon.com, so you can get it on your Kindle. And if you wanted simply a PDF of it for your iPad or whatever you use as a device, write to me and you can get that. I'll give you information how to do that. This year, 2016, we had 95 reporters from 26 different states, 1,604 reports, 235 roses reviewed. And we have as a number of the reviewers of the hybridizers themselves. And often the first time that exhibitors learn about new roses is through Horizon Roses. That's why I put this picture up, the Little Queen, which Fred Wright has just introduced as a mini-flora. And Fred Wright is one of the participants in Rose Exhibitors Forum. Tommy Hebert is also one of the participants. And so we get information on the very newest of varieties, many times from the hybridizers themselves. And you can observe a lot just by watching, as Yogi Berra taught us years ago, walk through the rose show and see what's there, and you can see what grows well in your area and what is winning. People ask me sometimes, particularly those who are non-exhibitors, well, how do I know what a show rose has? How are they judged? And for those of you who are judges and those of you who are exhibitors, it's the familiar table of points. I put that up just simply to remind everyone of what factors are considered in judging show roses: form, color, substance, stem and foliage, balance and proportion, and size. A couple of points about the prime elements I like to emphasize both to judges and to exhibitors as well. Form is the most important. It is, however, 25 points. It is not, as many exhibitors think, or many other judges think, 100 points. It is 25 points. It's the most important. The color and substance, which are very, very closely related to each other. Substance for the non-exhibitor or the non-judge, and we're basically talking about the freshness of a bloom. I mean, if you look at a bloom, it's fresh, it was just recently cut, it's got substance, it's full of moisture, it's full of water. got good color, that actually counts for more than the form. And then here is the key thing. It is a rose show. It's about blooms. It's again about the point that I'm making is the reason I grow roses and we judge roses at a rose show is we're judging the rose. And that's what matters. 70% of the points are in the bloom. The term exhibition form has a very specific meaning in rose shows from a judging standpoint, and it's important if you're showing hybrid teas, miniatures, and mini-floras. This is the definition. Classic hybrid tea form displays a high-pointed center with petals unfurling from the point in a symmetrical spiral to the outer row of petals that ideally lay upon a horizontal plane. Those words were written over 100 years ago. That has been the standard of exhibition form for at least that long. And there is the rose Randy Scott, which to my mind most perfectly, I mean, that is perfect exhibition form. Viewed from above, the petal edges should lay within a circle. When I took the judging examination, I was handed a circle and a triangle, a cut-out circle and a triangle, and told to hold them up and say, remember those two forms because that's going to teach you how to judge. And what does the circle do? Well, the circle has to do with a circle. A queen is straight, clean, and perfectly round. One of my mentors, a fellow by the name of Vic Colley, taught me that years ago. And that was our miniature queen at the San Diego National. And as you can see, it is perfectly round. From the side, there's the triangle. That's what was described to me. We want to see a triangle. We want to see the petals coming out so that they come out like this, and they come out as a triangle. Years ago, I did a program using the golden triangle because the golden triangle is the form of the triangle that basically exhibition form attempts to define. Here's another example. This is a rose called Jewel Grace, which was the Queen of Show at the San Diego Rose Society show in 2015. As you can see, it is an open, it's not a fully open bloom, but it is open where the petals come down to the side. Color and substance. As I mentioned before, they are very closely related. Theoretically, the judge is supposed to know the normal color range and basically ask themselves, is this the best color that it can display? Well, that's what judges are supposed to do, but I can tell you, judges are human like most of them are, like you and I, and they are attracted to color, and color matters. Color really does matter. This was our Queen of Show, mini-flora Queen of Show at this year's San Diego Rose Society show, and as you can see, it's a very colorful rose. In theory, color, just because it's an ugly color, it's not supposed to, the judge is supposed to evaluate based on what the color is. I won the first queen of the country with Table Mountain a number of years ago. And I remember one of the other exhibitors said that I ought to be ashamed to have put it in the show because of this, but that's its color. It's this pink rose with these weird green edges, or Lady Eowyn, which to my mind looks more like a Brussels sprout most of the time. But there you can see, even despite the color, both of these were queens because it's got the form, and theoretically the judge is supposed to disregard the color. Just because they don't like the color is not supposed to be a factor in judging. Judges are also supposed to have what are called a set standard of perfection, and in selecting a rose, if you wanted to go and become an exhibitor, if you think about it, what theoretically the judge is supposed to compare in the judge's mind with the best specimen that they ever saw of that particular rose. And what you run into is what I call the fish that got away syndrome, where the judge, is looking at the peace rose and he remembers one from 25 years ago that somehow, was the most wonderful peace rose they've ever seen. That's why new roses, old roses have difficulty winning in many cases because the judge is remembering something that just has improved with time. Whereas if it's a rose they've never seen before, it is by definition the best one they've ever seen. And if it meets the other criteria, then it's got a leg up. Frank Benedello once told me that the newest roses always gets 10 extra points I'm not sure that's the case, but I remember this, the first time I ever saw this rose was at the Carolina Top Gun a couple of years ago, and it was the queen of show. I voted for it because it was the best one I'd ever seen of that. In fact, it was the only one I'd ever seen of that. And as you can see, it's got form, it's got color, it's got everything else, and it's the best one I ever saw, which is why I voted for it, and every other judge did as well. So let me talk about show roses that you can grow. And I'm going to start with hybrid teas. This is our hybrid tea bed in our backyard. The Horizon Roses has what we call the honor roll. And the honor roll are roses that have been evaluated in Horizon Roses, are considered to be bankers. Excellent roses, excellent show roses that we basically retire from further consideration in Horizon Roses and put together our list in our honor roll. And it is an excellent list of show roses. Get Horizon Roses, study the honor roll, and you will find, in fact, if you look through those names and you walk out to the show table, you're going to see a lot of the very same roses that are listed there, and they are on the honor roll. The latest addition to the honor roll this year was Crescendo, which is very similar to, in its color and its form, to Gemini, from which it is bred, and is a very good rose that you can grow. I think the best in terms of form is Randy Scott. I mean, I showed a picture of it earlier. Here's another picture of it. As you can see, spectacular form, a spectacular white bloom, big bush, easy to grow. And Donna Martin, the rose that is a sport, a genetic mutation of Randy Scott, where it appeared in our garden. Color, I registered it as a light pink. Many times it is a light pink. More often it is a lavender. Donna likes the word lilac. We'll use that. Some have described it as gray, which it sometimes is, unfortunately or frankly, but it's still a very, very attractive rose. The leading exhibition rose for years has been Moonstone. The Moonstone out there again on the show table, an outstanding rose. Just a year in and year out, it's either number one or number two. And it's because, and you're talking again about a rose, you can grow this rose. If you don't grow this rose, you can grow it. It is not a fussy, fussy rose. The ones that I have grown, it makes a big bush, it makes a lot of blooms, particularly on Fortuniana, and you can usually find some very good blooms to show. It has a tendency to sport. I noticed out there on the show table we have a Marlin's Day, and I always find Marlin's Day very interesting. I have here 6 roses that are all labeled Marlin's Day, and every one of them is Marlin's Day, and every one of these is a queen of show, and every one of these pictures is of a rose that I have seen and I can tell you is a fair representation of the color of the rose. There is a principle in judging roses that a rose is supposed to be typical of the variety. I like using this in judging because which one is most typical of that variety? The answer is that the variety tends to be atypical because the rose sports, and Moonstone has a number of sports, some registered, some not registered, and nevertheless this is a very interesting rose to grow. I happen to like Marlin's Day a lot. We won the district, actually the one that's not shown here is our district queen this year. With Marlin's Day, with a different one. This is our district queen in Albuquerque a couple of years ago, and the only problem with it is we had several judges question whether it was Marlin's Day. You know, it came off my bush that says Marlin's Day, and as you can see, it's quite different than the others. Outstanding exhibition rose. It rivals Moonstone a couple of years. It has in fact exceeded Moonstone for many years before Randy Scott and Donna Martin came along. People would ask me what my favorite rose was, and the best hybrid tea is Gemini. It makes sprays, it's prolific, it's easy to grow, and it's just an absolutely fabulous hybrid tea. St. Patrick, hybridized by my late friend Frank Strickland. There's a picture that was a queen of show. I think this is at the Tulsa show that Bob House grew a number of years ago. A wonderful yellow rose with green edges, still an outstanding rose to grow. Hot Princess came to us from the florist trade. And unlike many other florist roses, it's a very prolific rose when grown outdoor, excellent form. In our area, it has a tendency to mildew, so it's not as easy to grow as others, but it's well worth doing so. Black Magic, tough to get a hold of nowadays. Originally it was licensed by J&P, and Tantel, I understood, took back the licenses, or somehow it was affected by the bankruptcy. I'm not sure where you get it nowadays. We have 3 of them, and it continues to be a favorite of ours. Very, very prolific bloomer, very tall growing rose. Veterans Honor, the red rose. I would like to have fragrance, it would make it perfect, but it's also the superb red rose, and 2 years ago, it was the top exhibition rose. Let Freedom Ring, which Weeks Roses brought out, also a top rose for you to consider. New, Let Freedom Ring has thrown off an orange sport. Satish Prabhu, the great exhibitor from South Carolina, discovered this one. Zach Noble's named after his grandson, and it is an orange sport of Let Freedom Ring. So if you have Let Freedom Ring, this one will grow very well for you. This one's fairly new. Mr. Caleb, this is going to make our honor roll because it makes absolutely perfect round red blooms. Excellent, excellent form. Deep red color. In our garden, it's been somewhat slow growing. I've been impatient with it, but every time I get a bloom that it is so wonderful, we keep it. Red Intuition. This is from the florist trade also, the red and white stripe. The one that everybody is growing or wants to get their hands on this year, this is John Smith, who is the hybridizer of Randy Scott. Tremendous reviews in Horizon Roses, Sunny Sundays, and the first 3 blooms I got on this were all exhibition and beautiful. I'm waiting to get a little more size on it, but this is the rose. Look at the color of that. Baby's Blush, also from John Smith, a beautiful pink. And you might say, well, it's just another pink, but it's more than just another pink. This is the pink rose that has now come along. It's going to be the top pink exhibition rose.
Tom, can I say something?
Yeah.
In all my 30 years growing roses, Baby's Blush is the most perfect pink rose I've ever grown.
And you heard it from the man who grows it. This one is just brand new this year. Certified's brought it out. We've been growing it for a couple of years. Christine was a good friend of mine. Ring of Fire is the name that they've attached to it. It is an outstanding orange rose with outstanding exhibition form, very vigorous, worth growing as a show rose, worth growing in your garden. Tommy Heber Shug continues to get good reports in our, as well as Ms. Tiz, and it's kind of interesting to read the reports because it kind of goes back and forth between them as to which the reporters think is the better ones that he's come up with. The original pictures of this showed exhibition form, and it does show exhibition form, which it has for about 5 minutes. This is a better picture of what typically the form is. But you'll notice that this was the most fragrant rose at the National in San Diego in 2014. It just won at Rose Hills as the most fragrant rose. This is one of the most fragrant roses that have come along in a long time. So if your thing is growing fragrant roses, this is hugely, it's a big bush. It's taller than this in our garden already, and that's on Dr. Huey. I can hesitate to imagine what this is going to look like on Fortuniana. Multiple blooms, and the fragrance is just kind that makes your eyes water. Turning to the mini-floras. Mini-floras are between miniatures and floribundas in size, or at least in theory that's what they are. Here's the honor roll of the mini-floras. Again, you'll recognize a number of names, and if you go out and look on the show table, you'll see a lot of those very same names. Once again, you should get Horizon Roses with the honor roll. I put Peter Cottontail up here because that's one of my roses that is on the honor roll. And speaking of my rose, this is the best rose I ever hybridized, Buttercream, which is still one of the top mini-floras that there is. Very disease resistant, easy to grow, makes a nice sized bush and multiple blooms with excellent form. The number one exhibition mini-flora nowadays is Whirlaway because of its exquisite form. It's a vigorous grower. In our area, it tends to be a thrips magnet, which is probably the only negative thing I can say about it, but that is a difficult rose if you have problems with thrips. Dr. John Dickman, outstanding mauve mini-flora rose on Fortuniana, makes a huge bush, many multiple blooms. Baldo Villegas. I put up Baldo and I put up Shameless. And I go back to Baldo, and I recall in Horizon when Don Myers asked a couple of years ago, is Baldo shameless? And an ongoing dispute among exhibitors is whether or not Baldo and Shameless are one and the same rose. I am assured by Richard Anthony, who's taken over Whitwell's operation, that they are distinctly different roses, and he's described them to me. And he made sure I had both of them in my garden, which I do, and I have both of them in my garden, and I cannot tell the difference between them. So he tells me, the difference between them is one has a tag in front of us that says Shameless, and the other has a tag in front of it that says Baldo. And so I kind of keep track of where I bought it from to enter them on that basis. I can't tell the difference, and I know that for years, I'm not sure that Whit could tell the difference, Whitwells could, so people would order Baldo and they'd get Shameless, or they'd order Shameless and they'd get Baldo. And so I think the two are hopelessly confused, but nevertheless they are, I'm assured, two distinct roses. I like Powerhouse a great deal. We won the Mini-Flora Queen of Show at the National with this in San Diego. Velvety orange petals, big, tall grower, excellent. Showstopper, another Frank Benedetto rose with a seashell type color to it. Again, very vigorous, easy to grow. You like color, Abby's Angels, one of the top exhibition mini-floras. Beautiful color, very vigorous, very tall. This thing's over my head as a mini-flora on Fortuniana with tremendous color. Cooper, the American Rose Society gives a Member's Choice Award each year for a rose that's been evaluated in the Roses in Review program and determined to have been one of the most outstanding rose of the year in that program. And Cooper was given this very dark red mini-flora, makes excellent sprays, really nice garden rose. You get a lot of blooms out of this thing, and many of them very well formed, as that example shows. The newer ones, this is just going on to the honor roll. Tammy Clemens, David Clemens hybridized Whirlaway, which is named after a racehorse, and most of his roses named after racehorses. This one he named after his wife for their 20th wedding anniversary. And for years, hybridizers kind of shied away from naming roses after their wives because there was a long historical pattern of roses turning out to be kind of not very good roses that they named after their wives. But that trend has changed with Donna Martin and with Tammy Clemens. Here's an example of one that he hybridized. This is absolutely a superb mini-flora, superb redwood. He's come out with this one, Bold Ruler, and I've been growing it. I'm not sure how it will do for you here. You're going to have to find out. If David is very picky on his roses, so they have to be like superb before he'll put them out. This thing has about 70 petals. We've counted as many as 100 on it. And so that always concerns me in California because they don't open for us. So we can't get Uncle Joe, for example, to open in California because it's got too many petals. So far it's been looking good, remains to be seen. This was our convention rose at the San Diego National Family Holiday. Jim Spruill, the hybridizer from Bakersfield, California, produced this outstanding, beautiful rose. We surprised everybody by actually giving them a very good rose to take home from the convention. Fred Wright has this spectacular rose, Gift of Love. It's probably as big around as this hybrid tea that's sitting in front of me, at least that big around. And the mini-floras keep growing in size. And so I've been, maybe we need a new class, the mega-flora is what my idea is to call this. Nevertheless, it's still smaller than a floribunda, but it's really pushing the edges of it. Alakazam. Everybody loves the color of this one that I came up with. The story behind Alakazam, for those of you who follow, there's a rose called Simsalabim that Cordes put out a number of years ago. They sell into the florist trade as a spray rose. A spray rose in the florist industry is a mini-flora. It's a small rose. However, our folks at Modern Roses thought a spray rose should be a floribunda, and they registered it as a floribunda because they didn't understand the German term. And we couldn't get Simsalabim changed as a floribunda, so it's a sport of hocus pocus. There's a whole line of roses. I could spend an entire program on this, but basically what I did is I got the sport off of hocus pocus that was identical to Simsalabim, and I sent in the registration and called it Alakazam. And I got a letter back or email back saying, what's the difference between Alakazam and Simsalabim? And I wrote back, well, Simsalabim is a floribunda and Alakazam is a mini-flora. Yes, because that's what I registered it as. So they're still holding on the registration. I'm assured that they're going to fix that because they probably don't want to irritate me on that subject, but it's in the combined rose list. You can show this rose. I simply wanted to get it so you can show it for what it is, which is a mini-flora and a spectacular one at that. Everybody who's seen that picture said, I want that rose. Here's another one I introduced. We're talking about exhibition form, and that's different than the exhibition stage of a rose because roses that we show are not all exhibition form, which is, as I've described to you, but are often different kinds of forms. We will recognize the forms of old garden roses, of floribundas, of shrubs, and so on. And here is one I registered as a mini-flora because it's like a little David Austin rose that I named Coconut Shrimp. It just reminded me of the dish at Coconut Shrimp. In fact, I looked at the picture on, I put up Coconut Shrimp and looked at all the images on Google, and I said, well, that's the right color for it. And so I put on my Facebook site, I put this picture up, and I said, I'm thinking of calling this Coconut Shrimp. What do you think? And about a third of the people wrote back and said, I hate that. And 2/3 said, that's a great name. So, but everybody had an opinion. And so that's why I went and named it Coconut Shrimp. Here are miniatures. This is one of our miniature beds in our house. It's the front of our house. There's the honor roll of miniatures. I put Nancy Jean here because it's a miniature. That's the way Vernon Rickard went and registered it as a miniature. And now the classification committee has decided after 15 years of it being registered as a mini that it should be a mini-flora, and I've reclassified it starting next year as a mini-flora. We've got a miniature queen out there, and there's been a fair amount of uproar about that. Whether or not that decision will stand remains to be seen, but I do alert you to the fact that Nancy Jean may be a mini-flora next year. The top miniature rose by far is Joy. The other case where David Clemens did not name his rose after his wife or his racehorse, he named it after his mother. And his mother's name is Joy. This is absolutely superb rose. If you grow one miniature rose, this is the rose you should be growing. Because not only is it the #1 exhibition miniature in terms of winning Queen of Show, it is by far the best #1 exhibition miniature in terms of winning the miniature spray, because it sprays and it blooms and it blooms and it blooms like crazy. Before there was Joy, there was Bee's Knees. Bee's Knees continues the #2 miniature, an absolute spectacular miniature, great color, wonderful growing rose. That was a Members' Choice Award in its year as well. Fair Hope, which went 14 years in a row as being the #1 miniature rose, continues to be an outstanding miniature rose. If you want to grow miniature rose, I just gave you the 3 that you should be growing that you could take to a rose show. Or you could grow Irresistible, which was issued at about the same time as Fair Hope, and it was #2 to it. Just about every year that Fair Hope was #1, Irresistible was #2, and it continues to stay as one of the top It's also an excellent rose in terms of making sprays. Robbie Tucker's Renegade. This one I suggest if you grow it, you give it an extra year before you lose your patience with it, because it takes a while to really begin to take off and produce outstanding color. Daddy Frank. Robbie produced Miss Flippins, which is an outstanding rose in its time. Daddy Frank, he originally registered as a mini-flora, but then concluded it was a miniature, which is the correct classification for it. Outstanding red rose, very vigorous. Again, all of these roses you can grow in your yard, and you're going to get a lot of blooms. Dr. Tommy Cairns, one of Frank Benedella's last roses, in good form. Chris Greenwood came out with Hello Gorgeous. This one is really vigorous grower, this interesting light green foliage that is nevertheless disease resistant, at least in our yard, with these spectacular blooms. Wanderlust Glenn Smith, also known as J.R. Smith in Pennsylvania, has been hybridizing, and I grew this rose, and if you were to subscribe to Horizon, you would know how to grow this rose. So you need to give this rose an extra couple. This one's a slow starter. You know, and I was beginning to lose patience with it, frankly, until I read the reviews of other reporters who said, hang on to it. And I did, and now it's just taken off and producing multiple blooms of outstanding form. This was, I think, was one of the entries that was, I believe, on a court of honor at our district show earlier this year. Back to decorative form. In Arizona, we have a classification for decorative form, and what wins it all the time is Mariota. And again, if you like the decorative form and you have a place to put it, then Mariota is one that you should be growing. You want to see a spray. The sprays don't have to be of exhibition form. A spray, a miniature spray, can be whatever the form the rose is. And here's an outstanding spray that won at our rose show in San Diego in 2015 of Mariota. Here is a spray of Joy, which was the best in show at the recent North Central District show just a month ago. I took this picture of it where it was the winning not only the class but as the best of show. Here is Irresistible. You can see the comment I made about it being a spray rose as well. This was the best of show back in 2007 that we showed. And talking about different forms, how about this form? This is really more of a polyantha form, gourmet popcorn, which excellent sprays, and you can grow it and you can show it. Or Arizona has classes, and some of the shows in California for micro miniatures. It's not really a recognized class as such, but this will not only win the micro miniature spray class, it does almost all the time in Arizona, but you can win a class for, there's any number of uses for elephant rose. It's a great arranger rose. And look how it grows. It's a little guy. This is on our patio where we have two of them, as a matter of fact, in little hanging baskets of elfin glow. Oh, I did want to comment on Tattooed Daughter. There are many who think I hybridized it. I did not. I was testing this rose for Richard Anthony and my daughter. This is my daughter's elbow. That's her tattoo. I had nothing to do with this, guys. But, you know, if your daughter wants to put on tattoo, that's fine. That's my granddaughter. And so we were looking at this rose, and I said, gee, that rose looks an awful lot like your tattoo. And she says, yeah, it does, Dad. I said, well, maybe we could get it named after you or something, you know, like Tattooed Lady. Well, Sean McCann had already done a Tattooed Lady. I called up Richard. I said, can I name that rose? You got a name for it yet? He said, whatever you want. Tell me what you want to call it. So I came down between Tattooed Mom or Tattooed Daughter. I figured from a marketing standpoint, it would be better. More people would buy a rose for their tattooed daughter than they would for their tattooed mom. Singles, that rose I just showed you is actually a semi-double. A single, just for show purposes, for those of you unfamiliar with the term, it basically means it has a single row of petals, 4 to 8 petals, and there are many examples of outstanding miniature roses, roses of all types that are singles. This is the one of the very best of the miniature roses. A single is a single. I get asked this question from judging seminars. Somebody will look at a rose and say, well, that rose in front of me has 9 petals. I just counted them. You know, count the rose's number of petals in that rose, and I can tell you there's more than 8 there. Is it a single? Well, yes, it's a single. And how do I know it's a single? Because it's listed as such in the publication. And if it's listed as such, it's a single. It doesn't, you're not, you know, to put it another way, you can't take moonstone, take all the petals off except for 5 and enter it as a single in the show. And so a single is a single because it's classified as such. You like sunglow, grow this rose. Burling Long came out with this. She was the one who did all the budding and the legwork for Ralph Moore for many years. And she has Maroon 8. I love that rose. When I saw the picture of it, I called up Burling. I said, by the way, how'd you name that Maroon 8? She said, well, it's maroon and it has 8 petals. So there you have the actual story behind the naming of Maroon 8. Grandifloras. What is a grandiflora? That's always a very interesting question. It was invented in the U.S. to explain the rose Queen Elizabeth, and having explained the rose Queen Elizabeth, then is basically disregarded by the rest of the world. And any number of weird roses, some good, some bad, have been classified as grandifloras over the years. The only one on the honor roll is gold medal, which is really probably not a grandiflora in the first place. So here's a more recent one that was a Member's Choice Award. Excellent disease. This is a nice rose to grow, but the blooms are very, very small. To my mind, Tom Caruth kind of redefined this class by bringing out some roses that he classified as grandifloras being basically big floribundas. It's probably a better description of a grandiflora, and this one in particular, Wild Blue Yonder. For the shows that have a class for grandiflora spray, this wins 50% of the time. It just is superb, awesome. You want a giant floribunda that you chose a grandiflora, grow Wild Blue Yonder. Or grow this one. This is South Africa. South Africa is absolutely stunning. Stunning golden, yellow, grandiflora. I saw it for the first time in Columbus at the National Show, where it won the grandiflora spray, but also the National Challenge class that called for 1 grandiflora stem, 2 specimens that just blew our minds away. And then when we were at Rose Hills that fall, we were looking at, it was 105 degrees the day we were there, and the roses were really suffering, and there was an entire bed of these things just blooming like crazy. We got on the bus to go back to the hotel. Donna got on the phone and ordered 3 of them from Palatine that arrived in January, and we love this rose. Floribundas, I already told you that I have 100 floribundas. Here's another picture of our floribundas. Here's the honor roll of floribundas. Again, the number of familiar names to those who show roses. The point in showing roses that a floribunda spray simply needs to be whatever it is. It doesn't have to be exhibition form or decorative form or any particular form. It is whatever the form is that is expected of the rose. This is one of our favorites, won a district challenge cleaner show with a Lady of the Dawn. The judges do look at the form of the spray itself, and that matters. And so here, for example, this was the Queen of Show at the San Diego show in 2015. You can see that perfect triangle with the blooms, all on the same level. So the form of the spray, Passionate Kisses, is an excellent choice for your floribundas. Floribundas can be shown as sprays, or they can be shown as singles. If you're into a garden and you want to maximize your show potential, figuring out which ones can show either way. Hannah Gordon is the #1 spray, and I think it's either #2 or #3 as an individual rose. Excellent, superb floribunda. Julia Child is my favorite yellow floribunda. I just show a bush on Fortuniana in our yard. That's one bush in bloom earlier this year, and you can see why it's our favorite yellow floribunda. Our favorite red floribunda is Lava Glut. This is actually a collection of 3 sprays that make a ball, as you can see, and you can see why that's such a top show of Sexy Rexy, which for years was our #1 before Julia Child came along. Sam McGreedy, the great hybridizer, said this is the best rose he ever hybridized. Easy, again, to grow. Here's a new one you ought to be growing. Find out about Dancing Pink. That is actually 6 sprays of Dancing Pink that we won the class for 6 sprays in at our show in April. The week after, we won a class which called for at least 6 floribunda sprays in our own show, and we put 6 of them in that. And I took 12 sprays into the show, plus there was one in each class for Queen of Show, one Princess of Show, plus some leftovers in 2 different weeks, all from the same bush, to show you what this thing does. Sparkle and Shine. I avoided getting Sparkle and Shine because I thought, you know, how are you ever going to improve with Julia Child? By God, Christian Bedard, who does the breeding now at Weeks Roses, I don't know that he's made it better than, but this is an extraordinarily outstanding yellow floribunda. Many of you familiar with Johnny Becknell, that was originally released as a hybrid tea because Johnny loved hybrid tea so much. I managed to convince Eddie Edwards that Johnny also, what he liked more than hybrid teas is he liked to win. And so this will win as a floribunda individual bloom, or it will win as a floribunda spray. This is a fairly new one, well named. That's what I said when I first saw it. Oh my. It is gorgeous. An absolute gorgeous red velvety petals, very tall growing. Here we won it won the best floribunda. This won the best floribunda open bloom at a recent show. Turning to shrubs. I continue to dislike the classification shrub because it doesn't really tell me a whole lot. Classifying a rose as a shrub to me is about the same as classifying it as a plant. However, we grow a lot of roses that are in fact classified as shrubs. As you can see, quite a few of them in that picture there. The problem with many of them, Ping mentioned the Austin roses and my contribution to his asking about, you know, what we think of when we think of them. I think of big. Here's Graham Thomas, which David Austin in his book said is a 4x4 shrub.
No way.
In California, if you'll notice, it's up into the eaves, and that's only because it's been cut back several times in order to get it that short. And that's a problem that I've had with many of the Austin roses. It's just simply finding the room for them. One of my quests, like the guy with the lantern going around looking for the honest man, is I'm looking for the behaved Austin rose. Well, then here's another one classified as a shrub. Sally Holmes, which is a monster grower, also. Excellent show rose. Here's a very big growing one classified as a shrub. That was the #1 shrub last year in the country. We like Golden Celebration. Compared to Graham Thomas, it was actually on either side of Graham Thomas as a Golden Celebration. So it's more moderate, and still it's a pretty vigorous grower. I like this one a lot, Olano. Unlike, you know, curiously enough, you know, Austin roses, when you think of Austin roses, one of the things Ping asked about, everybody said #1 is fragrance. And Austin won the fragrance medal, the Edmund Fragrance Medal for this rose. The funny thing about it is it's not fragrant. I don't get any fragrance out of it. I never had a garden visitor get any fragrance out of it. When you look at the patent application that Austin filed, fragrance in England was none. You know, Austin hardly ever won any awards because the British breeders didn't like him. And so what the first award they gave him is for a fragrance medal for one of his few roses that isn't fragrant. I have no idea what the story is behind that, but it's at least a relatively behaved rose, and we like it a lot. This is our latest guess at what might be a behaved Austin rose. So far, it is behaved. I just say so far. We got Walterton Old Hall, for example, if you've seen that in the catalogs, which is supposed to be the most fragrant of all the new Austin roses. It's not. It's wonderfully fragrant, but it's not the most. But it's already overtaken a 8-foot triangle that we have it on. But this guy here has stayed small so far, relatively so. And so I'm optimistic about Olivia Rose Austin. He named it after a granddaughter. He says that it's the most disease-resistant one they've ever come up with, and so we shall see. I do want to mention the classic shrubs. Most of the ones that win as classic shrubs, here's a class that if you get into rose show showing, that is often not entered, and some shows don't have it at all. And it's a puzzle to many people what it is, because there's only 4 classifications of roses that you actually can show in it. And the primary one is a hybrid musk. And if you grow hybrid musk tend to grow as climbers. And this one wins all the time in class. It's a wonderful rose, except it's huge. And so if you want to grow something that will win, but it will make big clusters, those clusters come that big around, what a wonderful rose this is. Or if you want to win with one that's behaved, there's a hybrid musk that actually doesn't get much bigger than this. It's got a weird name, yes, Walperdang, I think it's a city somewhere in Belgium. But it's, we actually at one point won the best classic shrub at a rose, 6 rose shows in a row with this particular rose, Walperdang. Climbers, I've been talking about things that grow as climbers. These are actual climbers themselves. The Impressionist, John Clemens's climber that looks like an Austin rose. It's pretty much a straight upright climber with excellent blooms and beautiful form. The old favorite Altissimo, very stiff growing, tall climber. This is the best climber. When people ask me what climber to grow, it's also the #1 climber in the shows. 4th of July, Tom Caruth's spectacular climber that he considers the best rose he ever bred. His purple version of 4th of July is Purple Splash. You'd rather have a purple and white one rather than a red and white one. Otherwise, they're very similar roses. I happen to like Night Owl a lot. And it's now #3 among the climbers and exhibition roses. I ordered this rose in Arizona with some trepidation because if you get that dark purple, I figured that would burn. It does not. I don't know why not. It did not in Arizona. We were able to grow this in Arizona, and it really did very well. I would expect it to do well in Texas as well. Don't forget the old garden roses. We show in every class. When I talk about loving roses for their blooms, I am every single class. There's not a ARS certificated class that we have not won with an entry of, and we will show up at a rose show in all the classes. These are some of our old garden roses. And again, the problem with old garden roses, sometimes like shrubs, they can be pretty vigorous growers, and they also may have disease problems. Here's one, it's a nice, beautiful specimen out there on the show table I looked at of green rose. Many people don't like it. This wins. It is the #1 old garden rose, and it's also great for arrangements, and Donna loves to use it in collections of old garden roses because that green is like foliage that sets off the other roses, and so we're a big fan. And it's a behaved plant, and it's a China. China roses love heat. They love growing in this climate, and they love Southern California. Green rose grows very well there. Here's a behaved hybrid perpetual for you that is an excellent one with that beautiful button eye that I happen to like a lot, Marchesa Bocella. I am fond of this rose primarily because it makes these magnificent, long stem, very large blooms that are incredibly fragrant. This is a spectacular rose. It is not terribly well behaved in that it is a big grower, and you sometimes have to fight mildew with it, but the blooms make up for that altogether. If you were to grow one old garden rose, Rose de Reche wins the Victorian class more than the next 5 roses in the class put together. And it wins 40% of the time in the country. And it is behaved, and part of the reason is because it's the only old garden rose many exhibitors grow, just for that reason. But if you wanted to grow one, that's the one you should be growing. Or Pink Pet, which is known around here sometimes as Caldwell Pink. As far as I can tell, they're the same rose. I won't get into the argument about that because they look to me to be the same rose, but I like Pink Pet because it's an excellent show rose in the Victorian class, and because again, it is a behaved rose and it is a China that grows exceptionally well in our climate. Here's one that you will have difficulty finding, but if you can get your hands on this rose, you want it. Paul Barden, a breeder who's now retired from breeding roses, is breeding some other plants, crossed a moss rose, one of Ralph Moore's moss rose with another of Ralph Moore's rose has mossing in it. This rose is mossed. The mossing there. Button eye, very glossy. Foliage, very, very glossy, disease-resistant foliage. It's absolutely stunning rose. Everybody's seen this rose in our garden, wants it. Rogue Valley sells it, but is out of stock at the moment. If you can get it, you want it. And he also produced this one called Golden Buddha, which is a hybrid bracteata, technically an old garden rose, beautiful golden rose, outstanding. This continues to win in our San Diego Rose Society show. I mentioned polyanthas. I'm going to be speaking more on them this evening, but if you want quick show roses, the #1 polyantha is the fairy, which has been around for years and is now challenged by Wingding, the beautiful new polyantha from Tom Caruth. And my favorite polyantha, again, I'll tell you more about these this evening when I do a program on polyanthas. And finally, you grow all of these roses, and then you'll say, well, how do I show them? Well, you can get my book, which is unfortunately out of print, or the way you learn how to show roses is go out and cut the best roses in your yard, the ones that you like, because the blooms are beautiful, and get them to the show. And take them to the show. Carl Mahaney taught me this year. He's an exhibitor from California, has been around longer than I have. By some time, he just said, take the best you got and do the best you can with it. And sometimes you'll be surprised. Sometimes you'll make mistakes. In fact, I guarantee you, you'll make a lot of mistakes. It doesn't really matter. You want to just go and put them in the show to enjoy them. I like putting this picture here. What's wrong with that spray? You know, if you're a judge, well, what's this rose doing up there? You know, I put this rose in the show, and I remember putting it in the show, and it was the best one of it that I had, and so I put it in the show, and I'm putting other stuff in the rose, and afterwards I came back and I looked at it and I said, God, how did I do that? Gee, I left that rose just like that. I was the queen of show at the National Show 2012 San Ramon.
Were there no other entries?
There were other entries, Don, but they weren't as good. And that's really the point that I make is even though I screwed this up, it still was a nice spray. It was fresh, it had color, it had the other stuff, and it was the best one there, and it won. So the point that I'm making here is take the best you've got, take them to a show. You will have, I put together a list years ago, an article called 10 Reasons to Grow Roses. I went through all the reasons, like a David Letterman thing. It comes down to, we do it because it's fun. And it's just really fun to grow these beautiful roses in your yard, roses that have blooms that you can be proud of, and cut those blooms, take them to a rose show, have fun. You might even wind up being the queen of show. And you keep in mind, rose shows are not competition between exhibitors to see the most trophies. The day after watching the Westminster Dog Show on the TV, if you've ever watched that, somebody asks you who won the dog show. Do you give them the name of the handler? Did you even notice the name of the handler? Probably not. I never do. The Cocker Spaniel won. And the same thing with a rose show. This is about roses. This is about friends getting together, bringing in roses and sharing them together. Friends helping friends. There's several examples. Peter Alonso helping me at San Ramon. It might have been him who put the darn marmalade skies in. Although I can't criticize it. It won. You know, I would have won if I had taken that bloom off. You know, that's an interesting thing. Here's several. They all dressed in the same T-shirts to make the team. Here I am with my good friend Lynn, her late husband, putting an entry into the show. That's what rose showing is all about. Cut your best blooms, take them to the show, have fun, find a new exhibitor, help them out, pass it on. This is my new friend Eric Hayden, who brought his book copy when he met me the first time so I could sign it for him. I told him that the valuable copies are the ones that are not signed, my friends. I think I signed every one I sold. So, but anyway, he brought it to be signed. He won Queen of Show that day and won Queen of Show at 7 consecutive shows in the New York area. Now moved to North Carolina. And the biggest thrill for me is just to have this new exhibitor come along, be delighted to learn about how to show roses from my book and to be successful at doing it. And that is the end.
spray?
Of course I spray.
Okay.